let nobody turn me around, turn me around, turn me around. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around. I'm gonna keep on walking, keep on talking, marching on the freedom land. Keep on walking, keep on talking, keep on walking, keep on talking.
You're listening to Black Belt, a podcast where we amplify the voices of Black folks down South, working toward solutions to some of our region's biggest challenges, all with a dash of well-seasoned Southern fun.
Keep on talking, keep on walking, 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 keep on talking, keep on.
Hey there, it's Adina White with Black Belt. On today's episode, we're turning the microphone over to Dr. Karama Neal. If you're wondering who she is, check out episode 43 to hear her story and learn why she urges people to choose Arkansas as a place to call home. Take it away, Karama.
So hello, everyone, and welcome to Choosing Arkansas. We are so pleased to have you here where we share stories to encourage you to make Arkansas your new home. So again, thank you for joining us today. We're very pleased to welcome our guest, Shamim Okolloh, to Choosing Arkansas today. And she is a banker here in Central Arkansas. I'm so excited to learn more about her story of how she came to Arkansas and how she has chosen Arkansas. And as usual, we will let her story really reveal itself in our conversation. So Shamim, welcome. Welcome to Choosing Arkansas. So glad to have you here.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. This is amazing.
Absolutely. We're so pleased to have you as well. So we'll just get right into it. So you were born in Nairobi and you came to the United States when you were 19. And obviously that's a big move, and the United States is a big place. And so talk to us about how you made that decision and where you decided to go.
Yeah, so I came at 19 and I started off in Pennsylvania, coming for college, attending Slippery Rock University. And that was because my older sister, Ori, was at Pittsburgh University. And so I followed her to the state where I was familiar with. And then about a year and a half later, I made the switch to Georgia. And I remember my English professor, Dr. Kane, when she knew I was applying to colleges in Georgia, she was like, "Oh, you have to attend Spelman." And I was like, okay. And so I applied to 3 colleges in Georgia. I got into all 3, but I ended up at Spelman. So initially, my journey was college. It was a 5-year visa at the time. We came for 4 years of college, 1 year work permit. The plan was to go back to Kenya in Nairobi. I was born and raised there. I loved it. And this is year 25. And
Life happens, doesn't it?
It does. It does. I was like, yeah, 20 years later, I'm still here. But the initial pursuit was higher education.
It's so interesting that you share that. I think my husband's family is from Ghana,
Yeah.
western side of the continent. And when his parents came, he was born in the United States. When his parents came here, they kind of came with the same idea. Like, we're going to go get educated, we're going to get our degrees, we're going to go back to Ghana. This was just after independence and help build the country.
Yep.
And obviously that didn't quite happen, right? Like, my husband was born here, he's still here, they're still here. So things happen, life happens, and you make decisions on the fly and you roll with it. So you came to Georgia. Talk to us about why was Georgia? It sounds like you applied to 3 places in Georgia. So you were, for some reason, you were already thinking about the South, at least in the context of Georgia. What was that decision like?
So I came in 2020, and the year after was 2021, which was 9/11. And that shaped a lot of things for the country as a whole, but then it impacted international students too. And so there was a switch in opportunities that we had in terms of scholarships while we were in Pennsylvania. That changed. And so, I was like, I might as well go to a bigger city. There was more opportunity in Atlanta. There was more Kenyans in Atlanta. I was in a smaller town.
Yeah.
In Pennsylvania. In Nairobi, on its own is 9 million, right? 9 to 10 million people. The country is almost 50 million. So I'm a big city girl. And I was like, okay, when I visited Atlanta, I was like, I think this is it, you know? And I was in my early 20s. And so going to Georgia, I kind of felt more like home for me because it was a bigger city. There was more people of color, there was more Black people, there was more culture, right? The restaurants and just it was like most people know the Black Mecca. So even for internationals, it was easier to settle into Atlanta, and I made that home until 2020, 2010. And I loved the experience. I loved, you know, just meeting people from different communities. I attended a HBCU. Prior to attending Spelman, I did not know what HBCU was, right? A historical Black college. I was just a science major. I was a nerd. And so I moved from one science, environmental science program to another at Spelman, and it was just mind blowing because I had kind of moved from a predominantly white university to a HBCU, and there was this excellence all over. I remember, you know, my incoming year when I transferred to Spelman, that summer I had worked at a gas station, and all my peers were like, yeah, I spend my summer with BMW headquarters, and I spend my summer in New York with Merrill Lynch, and I was just like, yeah, I spend my summer at the gas station.
It's all right. It's all
And
right. We got to pay
I
bills.
know, I know. And so I think at going to Georgia, kind of elevated my exposure to what was possible. And I loved it. And so I kind of settled in Georgia for a while.
It's real. I lived in Georgia in my early 20s too, and I would say agree. I fully agree. It's a great place to be.
Yes.
I was in Atlanta at that period as well. And I also was really intrigued, as you were talking about, like, Atlanta felt like home. There's a really good book that I talk about in one of my interviews with Black Belt Voices, as we were sort of introducing this Choosing Arkansas series. I talk about Charles Blow's book, The Devil You Know, where
Yeah.
he's trying to encourage Black folks to move to the South, right? And one of the things he says is that, because so much of our culture is in the South, so many of our
Yeah.
institutions, like colleges, like banks, like other kinds, are in the South, like it makes sense. And when I hear you say something like, it felt a little bit more like home than where I was, right? It to me, I hear that echo of that kind of analysis that Charles Blow did, and just thinking and recognizing, like, every place. I mean, obviously, Atlanta is not Nairobi, right? Um, but it's not surprising to me that there were elements that you found there that were like, this feels a little bit more like where I want to be. And it's great that you were able to do that and settle there for a while.
Yes, and we'll obviously talk about Arkansas not being home, but at the time in my 20s, there was like Kenyan churches that had service in Swahili.
Yeah.
And there was restaurants that you could go to that was serving the food. There was parties that the DJ was Kenyan.
Yep.
And so I was young, so we would party till 5 in the morning to like Lingala and at the time Afrobeats that everybody knows now. And we would leave and there's somebody selling samosas and Kenyan food at the back of the truck. And so it felt comfortable for
Yeah.
me because I was around my people. But what I didn't realize until later and that it boxed me in,
Mm.
it kind of was paralyzed me into just being in this box. And so
Mm.
although, coming from where I was coming from, it was amazing to be around, a city that had over 10,000 Kenyans, and I was just happy. But with time, I was like, maybe this isn't it. It was great in my 20s. Had a lot of fun, had a great experiences, lifelong friends. But at some point, I outgrew that, and I knew for what I wanted to pursue, and what was nagging in me was not in Atlanta. And I outgrew that environment for me, and I knew I had to kind of get out of that to be able to just shift. And so, but for the time that I was there, I loved it. It was great.
Totally feel you on that. So let's go there. Let's go there. You talk about, like, sort of recognizing there was something else, and it probably wasn't in Atlanta. Talk to us about what that was and how it led you to the Clinton School in Little Rock.
Yeah, and so, well, initially it was career driven.
Mhm.
And so I started off in environmental science, and I had some experiences with internships. And at the time, there was not a lot of representation. And so I had this fantastic opportunity, but in STEM. And that summer, I was the only Black person in this lab. And I just didn't feel welcomed and belonging. And it was very unfortunate. And I was just like, I think I want a career switch. I think I want something more people centered. I want to go back to grad school. Most people don't know that international students do not get financial aid and student loans, the traditional student loans, unless we have a co-borrower. Because we can get on a plane and go back home, right? Go back to Nairobi and can't track me there. Like, Equifax can't find me in Nairobi. Like, and so, trying to figure out at that point, like, I wanted to pivot from, the sciences. I had kind of gone back home for a while and done some work with the United Nations in Nairobi, and I really enjoyed that. So I said, well, maybe I can focus on a more people-centered role or kind of pathway. But I wanted to go to grad school to kind of get that knowledge and skill set. But I needed money. And so a friend of mine at the time, she had attended the Clinton School of Public Service. She was from Kenya. And I visited, Little Rock with her, and kind of found out about the school, visited the Clinton Center. It was definitely out of my comfort zone because everybody that I was meeting did not look like me, were not from Kenya. It was outside of what I had gotten accustomed to in Atlanta. And I was like, this is very different, but this is probably what I need to get out. Um, and at that time, I was also kind of exiting a marriage. And so I knew that I did not know anybody in Arkansas. Nobody knew me. And so I could have this clean slate. I could
Mhm.
pursue this opportunity in a city that would give me a fresh start and that wouldn't cushion me with what Atlanta gave me. I loved Atlanta, but I was like, I think for me to go into this other space, and at the time, I think I was turning 30 that year. And birthdays and milestones, you're like, okay, I was 29 turning 30 in November. And so that was it. And I did not know anybody in Arkansas at the time. I knew that the Clintons were from here, President Clinton, and I knew that the KKKs were somewhere in Arkansas. And I was like, I got a Muslim name, Islamic name. I am Black and a woman. This might not be where I need to go. However, I applied and got waitlisted the first time,
Mhm.
did not make it. I applied again the second year and I got in and I got a full scholarship and a full ride.
Where you go, girl?
Yeah, so it was the timing was impeccable. And so I packed my two suitcases, maybe three. I bought a one-way ticket from Atlanta to Memphis because that's what I could afford at the time.
Mhm.
And I had a Greyhound bus on a Sunday in August, actually about exactly the 20 in August, and took a 3 a.m. bus from Memphis, Greyhound, and got to Arkansas at 5 a.m. And a Clinton schoolmate picked me up and I started my journey there. And so outside of that bubble of the Clinton school, I had what I had kind of longed for was this fresh start and figuring out myself in America, all over again. But this time without the backing of my sister that I had in Pennsylvania, without the cushion of Kenyans in Atlanta, this was just me finding my own way. And here I am.
Here you are. I mean, that's a really, I mean, I honestly got a little chills as you were sharing that. It's I mean, kudos to you for having the courage to know yourself well enough to know what you need, even if it's like a little scary, maybe you're a little like, "Ooh, I'm not sure," you know.
Yeah.
But I mean that's not trivial that you were able to do that. So I mean, it's that's an inspiration in and of itself. And I appreciate, you know, as you talked about like what you knew of Arkansas at the time. You know, it's not surprising, right? I mean, we know this. This is why do you think we're doing Choosing Arkansas, right? Because we know the story. Like we know
Yeah.
what people think about our state, if they think
Yep.
anything at all, right? I mean, you know, you often have folks. My husband is one who just, I mean, Arkansas was just so not even on his radar. It was just like a non, just complete, just nothing, you know.
No, and most immigrants, like most Kenyans, start off in smaller towns to establish themselves and then move to bigger towns.
Mm,
I was going backwards. I was going from a big known town to a little town, and it just didn't make sense to most people because I was already in one of the top cities, right?
right.
And I was going backwards to somewhere nobody had heard of or knew about or had family there, and so it wasn't the usual path.
You know, and it's you know, obviously everybody's not international. But I think that's saying I felt very similar kinds of experiences. I lived in Atlanta for 14 years, and so when I moved back home, people were like, "Why would you leave Atlanta to go back to Arkansas? Why on earth would you
Yeah.
make that decision? Like you
Yeah.
totally settled." Like so, I mean, obviously it's not exactly the same, but I definitely I feel like I feel a kinship in there in terms of understanding what that looks like to say, no, I think I know where I need to be,
Yeah.
and you know, we're going to try it out and see what works, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, thank you for sharing that. So um you at that point, so you know you're at the Clinton School, you're enjoying that. What were you and obviously this is past your 5 years. At this point, were you still thinking about like going back to Kenya? Like were you what were your thoughts about because you've chosen the Clinton School, but at this point, I don't know, had you really
Yeah.
chosen Arkansas? I don't know what you like.
No, absolutely not. So I chose Arkansas. So the program was 2 years.
Right.
And I was very not committed to Arkansas. I was so not committed to Arkansas that my second year at the Clinton School, I actually did it in Uganda. I was like, I ain't feeling this place. I'm gonna take off and go home, go back to the continent
Mm-hmm.
and figure out because that was what I had initially wanted. And I would be like, that's an easy off ramp to go back and spend some time with doing some work with Heifer International in Uganda, which is right next door to Kenya.
Mm-hmm.
And it was great. It was 10 months because I had been back to Kenya for a little bit on vacation, which isn't real, right? I'm actually going to Nairobi next week on the 20. Well, we're in August when we're recording this. And so at the end of the month, I'm going for a family event and like it's vacation. It's so much fun. It's family. There's no schedule. And so I was like, I kind of need to feel what it looks like to work, in back home and make connections and move back. And so that was the plan to move back home. And I came back from graduation that 2012, kind of stayed that summer and wasn't sure at the time if I was really ready to move back home. Did I have enough resources? Because my peers were above me. Like my peers in Nairobi are like excellent. They have done so much work. They already had the connection. So just because I was in the States
Right.
and I had a master's degree didn't really essential anything. And so I was like, well, do I stay and get a little bit more experience, work experience after graduation? Do I move to DC because I was focused at that time in international development? Do I move back to Atlanta because, my friends were there and we had organizations like CARE, there was a more global connection in DC and Atlanta? Or do I stay in Arkansas? And so that summer I was kind of trying to figure things out. And then later that fall, I found out I was expecting a child. And so my family was like, come back home, you know? And I would have had the support at home, especially the next year after I had him. And, you know, I knew I had Atlanta, that support, you know, system. But dad was here, dad was from here. And so I decided to kind of stay here and figure out what family life would look like that first year. And then the it wasn't until my daughter was born that I was like, okay, I probably need to figure out for real, if I'm making the move, this is it. This is the time to make that decision. And so I had support from my family back in Kenya to say, come back, we got you. Cost of living is a little bit better in what the dollar could do at home in terms of help. So it is more affordable to kind of have like an in-house nanny and housekeeper and all those things. And I would have my family there. And I, you know, I had experience at the United Nations, but then I had work experience. And so I had that decision to make kind of like 2014, um, what I wanted to do after my daughter was born. And I think I sat with that decision the longest because it was literally altering where I was going to raise my children.
Mhm.
And I had two options at that time. It was either stay in Arkansas and Little Rock and raise my babies here, or move back home to Kenya and raise my babies in Nairobi.
So I mean, that's, you know, that's a decision, right? I mean,
Yep.
you got it life, two paths diverge in the wood, and I took the one less traveled by, whatever that poem is, right? Right. So we're about to have you make that decision. I think we all know what the end result is, but we'll talk you through that. But before we do that, let's take a quick break for a quick word from our sponsor, and then we'll come back and hear more from Shamim.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, well, welcome back. So glad to have you back. And when we left, we were hearing from Shamim about a choice that she had to make. And so talk to us about that choice and how you made it.
Yeah, so I made the choice to stay. I made the choice to stay in Arkansas, stay in the US, but and make Arkansas home, because then if I was staying in America, it was like Atlanta or Arkansas. You know, just in terms of Atlanta and the East Coast had more opportunities and it's bigger city, school systems, open, you know, or more diversity, or stay in Arkansas. And I made the choice to stay in Arkansas and raise my children here. And that was, at the time, a hard decision, but also in my heart, like in my gut feeling, it just made the most sense. So it was easy. I think it was hard in my head because I am so passionate about where I'm from, right? Nairobi in Kenya, and I know what the continent has to offer. But I had to kind of make a decision, not as Shamim, the individual, but as a mother, and look at what was best for my children. And so, you know, we were co-parenting well with their dad, and I knew it was important for them to have him in their lives and him, you know, be able to attend recitals and, you know, the things that would be hard in Kenya, like you would be sending a video. And so moving back to Kenya would have been easy for me as a parent in terms of logistics and help. But being in Arkansas was best for the children because they would have both of us here and they would have their dad here. And at that point, I think it was then, if I'm putting my roots here, one thing I did not have at the time was a village, which I had by default in Kenya. And so I was like, well, let me get myself together. Let me figure out a village and a support system for my family. And that's when I kind of made the decision to buy a home, you know, started looking into home ownership. I am a banker now, was not at the time. I was in nonprofit, um you know, working but being food insecure, working full time. And so, I was on WIC and food assistance programs. And I think that was one of the things too. It was like we did not have the safety net programs in Kenya. And so here I was like, man, no matter what happens, I can always get SNAP, right? I can always get on WIC. At the time, I had, Arkansas Medicaid that covered health insurance for my children. I did not use it, but I knew there was daycare vouchers and different things. And so, in terms of the resources and the assets I had, I was like, I'm gonna work towards it. But if I needed, like I needed at the time, there was provision for help and support. And it wasn't even my own immediate family.
Mm-hmm.
And so I kind of got myself together, attended first time homebuyer class here in Arkansas, at the time. And this is because people were watching, and I am a banker at heart. Like my credit score was 536 because I didn't have my mind was always, I'm gonna go back home, so I don't need to do all this American stuff. And so I didn't have any credit cards, which means I didn't have any debt. But it hurt because I didn't have credit history. And so because I was never attached to America, I was like, I'm gonna go back home. And I don't want, Navy SEAL coming out talking about, girl, you owe Capital One some money, so come back. And so anyway, so I had no debt, which is great. But I had to start establishing a village. I had to start establishing my financial footprint, and that took a while, but I knew that was what I wanted for my children. And so got my finances together, got, lender ready, bought off my first time home, which is where we are today. I qualified at the time for the first time home buyers, down payment assistance. And when I bought the house is when I was like, okay, maybe I need to pay attention to elections, and maybe I need to start paying attention to like local politics and school zones and all of these things that was never in my circle because I was only coming here for grad school. And so that was an interesting transition, 2015, 2017, in just, I had started afresh in 2010 when I moved here for grad school, but now I was laying my roots and my grounds here and understanding the school board and what was going on, and opportunities, and it just seemed all afresh again because I was looking at it from the lens of a parent who has made the decision to raise my children in Arkansas, right? They were born in Baptist Hospital. And when I bought my house, when I closed that October, I moved in with no furniture because I didn't want any debt. And so, my kids remind me that they didn't have beds for 3 months, and I would put a kanga, in Kenya we have the
Yeah.
lesos. So I would lay it on the floor in the living room with pillows, and they would sit there and lay down and watch the little TV that I had. But I was so proud because I had achieved this American dream of being a homeowner. And I think that settled me physically in Arkansas, but it settled me also mentally, right? My heart, my mind, my soul, everything was like, okay, this is home for real, for real. And I put my children in a school, I had to make that decision about where they went to school. And we were so fortunate to connect with families that we're now lifelong friends together, and we travel together. Our kids are kind of like cousins because the three families are not from Arkansas. So my one friend is from California, one is from Chicago. We're all raising our kids here. And so even if my children's cousins are back in Nairobi, we had some sort of informal family
Mm-hmm.
structure that we created very intentionally, but very fortunate that it worked out because I didn't know where to start. And so so that was it. That was that decision in 2014 that I had to make. And 10 years later now, 2024, I am here and thriving.
It's really good to hear you say that word thrive, right? I mean, it's especially when you come in, you're like, I don't know about this place, the KKK in one place, maybe some rice farming. I don't know what's going on, right? And I think it is. I mean, I've seen similar kinds of things with my husband, honestly,
Yeah,
right, and others who, and and it's just nice to hear you say that. Like you give it a little time, right? Take a
yes,
little time, look at it for what it is, meet people, right?
yeah,
Engage with folks. I really also appreciate you sharing how, you know, as you were making that very intentional decision, what that meant for how you became, frankly, very civically engaged, right? Like,
yeah,
what does it mean for me to l- understand where my school zone is, and how do I need to vote, and what do I like? All
yeah,
those kinds of things that really come from like saying this place matters, and my place in it matters. It matters for me. It matters for my kids. And so, how do I make it? How do I engage in it?
yeah.
To ensure it's still there. And so I really appreciate you sharing that story. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'll share a little, say a little bit. I remember as I was reading and preparing for this, I read somewhere that you talk about your approach to work as a public servant. You approach your work as a public servant with a passion for social change. So I wonder, sort of maybe even building off the civic engagement piece that you just talked about, how has living in Arkansas helped you manifest that service and that passion for change?
Yeah, and it has taken time. And I think it wasn't until probably, like I say, the 2015, 2016 window, when I kind of bought the house and got settled, and I was working with a local nonprofit at the time and traveling to different parts of the state, and kind of realizing what I thought Little Rock lacked compared to Atlanta. Once you go to Helena or to Duma, went to smaller towns, you're like, whoa, we got the resources, actually in Little Rock, and looking at things from an equity standpoint, and just realizing that we were so much more blessed here in the state, but not other parts of the city had it. But then also, I think in terms of which is, you're one of those people that I've mentioned this to Karama, attending and hearing about the unbanked and underbanked and what was going on in terms of resources and the Black community and Hispanic community, and 630 12th Street corridor, like all of that, and saying, okay, I have this role, I have this profession, and I'm serving this demographic that is also getting hit by health equity issues. It's also getting hit by academic or educational, equity issues, financial, there's all these gaps that is really the same kind of demographic that all these people are kind of working towards. And I have access to this folks, right, through my previous work in food banking. And so what am I going to do with it, And so that piece tied in with my education and background in, public service as a Clinton School alum and getting all that skill set matched kind of easier with me working in nonprofit. However, 2020 happened, another milestone, kind of like when I turned 30. And so now I was turning 40 and sitting here in quarantine for my birthday. I was supposed to be in Nairobi on safari, but my son, this was COVID. His class was sent to quarantine, and I was just sitting here and like, man, what am I gonna do? But then in my 40s, like when I was kind of doing that, I said, I think I want change. I wanted something that would push me again out of my comfort zone, but I could do work in a very non-traditional manner for me, right? Because nonprofit was easy. We're already serving the community. But I think with that exposure to kind of like the bank on community and the banking community, and realizing that there is this corporate entity that is coming together and wanting to serve these same folks that the nonprofit world is working with, that the city has initiatives for, the state, all of these folks together. And so kind of like with Atlanta, I was already very comfortable in the nonprofit world. I could do that work with my eyes closed. But when I turned 40, I was like, well, let me make the switch to corporate and still try to serve the community from that public service lens. And so I am a banker now in corporate America, and I serve, right, as a community outreach officer. I serve that same community that is underserved, tends to be food insecure, and I serve them with access, to credit and housing and business information, and I can be an advocate for a corporate entity, right? Who would have thought that as a banker, I can see myself as an equity and finance advocate, advocating for the community to the bank, but also advocating for the bank to the community and saying, no, 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 no. You were not told no because of the color of your skin. You were told no because your credit is at 540. Like this isn't racial anything. This is let's
Mm-hmm.
work, let's work you to be lender ready.
Yeah.
And I can be that bridge and that gap and serve, both mission and margin, for the bank. And so I think my background in nonprofit and my training, as a public servant, I can take that, and then we hear that banks are very systemic, right? The racial issues are system wide, and how can I play my role in shifting that dynamic and bringing in social change? And so I believe for me that was easier to do in Arkansas compared to if I
Mm-hmm.
was in a bigger state. And I tell people that it's the pathway to being a big fish in a little pond is easier here than like in New York and other places. Not impossible, but when you are a mother with children and responsibilities, your time is not the same. And so I have been able to make just very meaningful connections in Arkansas, make have great mentors in Arkansas, and great opportunities that have kind of been a stepping stone to everything I've been able to achieve. And so, I am a published author now. I wrote a book, with my son who's 11, about banking because of that, because I was able to see a gap in the society and a lack of women in banking and commercial banking or even in C-suite, and take that social issue, but look at it from a very business practical point that we just need more girls
Mm-hmm.
exposed to early careers in banking. But we wrote a book, and we're in local bookstores here in Arkansas. We've been very fortunate. We're in Pyramid and Pepper Hearts and even the big retailers in Barnes and Noble. And again, I feel like Arkansas, 14 years later, gave me the love that hopefully cemented for me that I made the right decision to settle here. And when we published that book, it has been kind of like the reward for, like, you did well, my child, here you go. Like a
It's a
cake.
great book.
Thank you, but it
It
was,
is.
we have received such tremendous support from, financial institutions in Arkansas, from, groups like Economic Arkansas that are statewide, and just opportunities. We've traveled to Northwest Arkansas with the book, and and it has just been a joy to kind of evolve with the state and the place where as Arkansas we are, and for me to feel like I could have played a role in it, and kind of taking a look at these are the gaps in our state, and in my own little way, this is how I can address it. And so people have said, okay, now you're gonna move up to the big, and I was like, yeah, no, I'm staying. I'm happy in Arkansas. I'm staying here. I hope the book does have
Mm-hmm.
national, uptake, but I can do that from Arkansas, right? I can make those states and national connections and international connections from Arkansas. I did not have to be in New York
Mm-hmm.
to be a New York Times bestseller and to break those barriers. I can do that. My son has a goal to be a New York Times bestseller, and think we can get it. I don't know how,
Mhm.
but we're gonna get it accomplished without having to relocate, right?
You will.
Just
Others have done
because,
it, you will too.
huh?
I said others have done it, you will too.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And
Mhm.
so I think that has been it, that I feel like I am somewhere that I can live in my purpose. I can contribute back to the community that has been so good to us, and be successful.
You know, as you say that, you tell that story. It reminds me of what I call the small state advantage, right? And I think it's one of the advantages is sort of the role of relationship and
Yeah.
the fact that in part because it is a small state, you do know a lot of people.
Yep.
You're not going to find everybody who's doing the same because there's not that many of y'all. So you have to branch out and meet different people and do different things. And some of those folks might inspire you to do things like write a book, or I mean, I can certainly point to things in my life that I never would have it wouldn't have crossed my mind to do if I were still living in Georgia. I'm 100% sure of that. Like it would not have
No,
done,
it
it would not
doesn't.
have happened.
No, it doesn't. And like later this year, I am a co-chair for the Women's Foundation of Arkansas. They are part of the purse. I remember when I attended that event, I was an intern and our VP at the time where I was couldn't go. And so I had her ticket and I went and I was blown away. But I was just like, oh my, I was very intimidated. Attending, I didn't know anybody in the room. Like I was an intern, nobody. And now, I am chairing or co-chairing the same event that I walked in and there's 1,000 women in the room. I didn't know anybody. I was intimidated, barely probably spoke to anybody, just ate my little food, saw it and took off. And, in that short amount of time, I'm having this opportunity to rally other women, right, together with the Women's Foundation of Arkansas and represent the work they're doing here at the state and so many other opportunities. We were awarded Ella the Banker Day by the city of Little Rock, and the mayor, and we hadn't, like, my children hadn't met him, but it was because of the book. And forever, we have that designation of, Ella the Banker Day with the city of Little Rock. That the proclamation
Yep.
hangs in our living room so we can walk by it and be like, oh,
It's wonderful. Yeah.
we have something from them, and I mean, it has just been so incredible, and we've put in the work, and so this did not happen overnight, but it is those meaningful connections and people who believe in our dream and kind of walks hand in hand with us. um and it has been a joy, but you're right. I believe it has been easier to break in and break through because we are in a smaller state.
Hmm. Yeah, and I'll just say you mentioned Ella the Banker. That's of course the name of the book. So if folks are interested in reading that, it's a wonderful book. You and your son did a fantastic job on it. It's great that your daughter was able to inspire such a wonderful gift for all of us. So thank you so much for that. So
Thank
as we
you.
begin to close, I'm going to ask just a couple of questions. So this is something this choosing Arkansas, this initiative we're doing to try to really highlight people's paths to this state,
Yeah.
people's choices around this state,
Mhm.
recognizing that there are others who, for whom maybe Arkansas is not on their radar, or maybe it's past their radar, but they kind of like, I don't know, maybe not. But hopefully hearing your story, hearing the stories of others who've been interviewed, will help them think differently. Why were you interested in doing this? Why did you feel like this was something that was worthy of your time?
Yeah, I think because Arkansas was not on my radar.
Okay.
I don't even think when I came to the States, I knew it existed. That was how far out it was not on my radar. But I believe that I made a choice that was very risky at the time. And if I have grown to love the state and chosen to raise my children here, as a woman of color, as an immigrant, as a single parent, then I'm hoping my story can resonate with somebody else that can be like, oh, I don't know if I want to move back home, I don't know if they're gonna have the same opportunities like the East Coast or whatever, or West Coast or London, wherever, that they can hopefully hear my story and it can inspire them to at least explore deeper or try to make those connections or give it a shot, because I didn't come here knowing anybody. I came on a 3 a.m. bus, out of Memphis. I'm not even like out of Memphis, and landed here at 5 a.m. and it was a good bet. Now people have to be intentional and kind of put themselves out there and attend networking events and kind of figure out what's going on in the community, civil engagement. But that's the easy part once you decide. And so I hope that somebody watching the series, and thank you so much for doing this, because it would have been helpful for me when I was kind of making that decision and looking and saying, do I want to, it's a full ride, but really, do I really want to go? Can I get another full ride somewhere else? That it happened how it should. And if they are having doubts if Arkansas is a place to stay, because some people are here and kind of want to move out, or if they're out and want to move back, either this is home where they were from or as an opportunity, that it works out for me, it's worked out for many other people that I know. And we can bring the talent here, you can
Absolutely.
have your talent here, you can grow it here, there's opportunities here. And if they're, our families, they have, the resources to make it what they want it to be. And so for me, I wanted it to be home where I could raise my children. It is more affordable. And so because of the affordability, also, I have the opportunity to travel with them, right? So, we've been recently to Pettigene and explored the state parks, and for 3 days, we were the only Black people out there in Pettigene Mountain.
My mother used to take me camping out there when I was a kid, and that was a long time ago. So there wasn't a lot of us out there either, but it's a wonderful place, and it's
Yeah, I will not be camping. We're in a cabin. So I am not doing a tent,
we were
but
in
I
a tent. My mother
cabin.
had us in a tent. My single mother had me and my friends in a tent.
Oh
So,
yeah, yeah. Mm-mm. We drove by that. I was like, yeah, Liam, look at the sands, not us. But I am a single
yeah.
mom, so I
Hmm.
felt safe,
Hmm.
up there at the mountains. And we've done Mount Magazine. And before, all my vacations were to Kenya, right? They were to Atlanta, Miami, we've done Bahamas. And I was like, I'm really not doing my kids a service because I'm raising them here. And I want them to know that we can vacation in Arkansas and explore the state and have a really good time. So we've done Northwest Arkansas, Crystal Bridges, the A Museum. They love it up there with them. We are heading to next month to Southern Arkansas for a book event. So they get to kind of see South Arkansas and explore that. We've had a book event in Russellville area, and we got to see that too. And so it's been really good because their world was like Little Rock, and then we get on a plane and go to Atlanta, get on a plane. Get on a plane and go to
Yeah.
like Miami, or I was like, we're gonna get out. And I was like, yeah, no, no. So I mix it up now for them. And like I say, I'm very intentional in also visiting spaces and vacationing here. And we had such a good time, at Pettigene. My daughter was like, we love it here. My son now wants to buy a cabin. He's like, when I'm a millionaire, mommy, I'm going to buy us a home in the cabin, out in the woods in Arkansas. And so again, for my child to be exposed to that and want to even be able to have an investment, here in Arkansas really speaks to the opportunities that we have.
Well, honestly, I can't imagine a better way to end than what you just shared, Shamim. I mean, you really hit upon right the two themes, the two state mottos that I remember and hold closely. Right, one of Arkansas is the natural state, which it really is. So many beautiful places to go and visit and see and commune with nature in our natural state. But then, of course, the state motto that I grew up with, right? There was a motto when I was a kid, which was "Land of Opportunity," and
Yeah.
it gets forgotten because it's not our state motto anymore. And for those who don't know our state, sometimes they laugh and say, "Well, it's probably a reason you got rid of it because it's not opportunity." Well, they're so wrong,
Yeah.
And your story really shows that. I'd like to think mine does as well. And I know so many other people who are really a demonstration of Arkansas as a land of opportunity. So I'm really grateful, Shamim, to you for taking time to really just so generously share your story in a way. You said you wanted to do it in hopes that someone else would benefit. Someone else absolutely will. And I look forward to sharing this in a way that other people can hear your story, be inspired. And like you said, just take a look, investigate,
And
explore, and see what's
yeah,
possible here.
yeah, and I like how you say the land of opportunity, because one, there is opportunities, right? That you can apply for whatever with the companies or organizations, but you can also create. So you could do,
Absolutely.
and I've been able to do that, right? So I had a great opportunity to move into a career, in banking as a trained scientist with a nonprofit, so I was able to have that opportunity. But I've also been able to create opportunities, right? As an author and a small business owner, and navigating that world. And, now we have like a CPA and an attorney and all the things that was never imaginable in my existence, even 5 years ago. We've recently applied for trademark. And so there is the environment that if somebody needs a soft landing, they can kind of start off their career. But if you need to create opportunity, it is also very possible. And there's so many support systems and organizations that kind of help people navigate that space, especially in the entrepreneurial field. And so you're absolutely right. Like both of those have been checks for me, that I've had great opportunities in the banking world, but then I've also had really amazing opportunities as an entrepreneur.
Yeah, I definitely have seen that as well. In entrepreneurship, but also in just getting things done, right? Like thinking about what kinds of things you want to see happen. And because it's a small state, because those relationships are kind of right in front of you oftentimes, if you want to take advantage of them, it really does facilitate doing that. This
Yep.
has been a joy, Shamim. Thank you so much.
You're welcome,
I
Karama.
really
Thank you
appreciate it. It's been a real pleasure.
it has. Now we have to go get some fufu together, and
Absolutely. Absolutely.
and I
Some
tell
chapatis and a
people,
bunch of other stuff too. So
yes, I was like, you have to have pilau, which is the other side of jollof, all right, for
uh-huh.
you in Africa. But yeah, this has been a joy. And just personally, you are one of the people that I so admired as I was transitioning, that opened really my eyes to the equity and up and you know what can we do to kind of shrink that racial wealth gap, whatever gap. And I remember hearing you speak, and I was like, man, that is a president of a bank, like, and this is a woman, and woo, in a room. And so it is from older Shamim that was a girl fan, when I first heard you speaking, to be able to be a guest with you. And I guess that's the whole point of this, is I listened to you at a convention or convening when I was still in the nonprofit
Yeah,
world, and here I am sharing this space with you, to get as intimidating as that was back then, to have this space to share with you, to feel like a peer, somebody that have admired your journey. And I hope I'm doing well with the passing of the baton
absolutely.
to us who are still in the industry, in the financial industry, and setting that next generation up. And so I just kind of want to say thank you to you, to this being amazing asset and a gem to the state, to women and Black women, for everything that you're doing to keep the stories alive, and to encourage others to see what we know to be true.
You're so kind, Shamim. It's so kind of you to say that, and I really, really appreciate it. It's one of those things where you try to live your best life, and you don't necessarily know who's looking, and that's part of the reason you try to live your best life, right? And so
Yeah.
I so appreciate that whatever was said and what the things that were done as we were doing Bank On and doing all those kinds of things, that resonated with you in a way that has clearly had so much impact in your life and the life of your children, and the work that you all are doing, the contributions that you are making to not just the state, but to the country, to the world.
Thank you.
We're grateful to have you here. We're so glad that you chose Arkansas, and we're so glad that all of you who are listening, who are watching, have chosen to spend this time with us.
Yeah.
We welcome your comments. Please reach out to us at choosingar@gmail.com, and we do hope you will listen and share and comment and choose Arkansas to make Arkansas your new home. Thank you all so much.
Thank you for listening. Be sure to subscribe and leave us a 5-star rating and a review on Apple Podcasts so others can find us. You can also listen to the Black Belt Podcast on most streaming platforms, including Spotify and Amazon Music. This episode was produced and edited by Katrina Dupins and Prentice Dupins Jr., with theme music composed by Prentice Dupins Jr. I'm Adina White, executive producer and founder. Black Belt is a production of Black Belt Media. Connect with us on social media and at blackbeltvoices.com.